Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, thank you so much for joining us for your last interview of the year. Now, the year has really been bookended with the parliamentary protest at the start of the year that turned into an occupation, that turned into a riot. And then at this end of the year, we've got inflation running at about 7.2%. What's your reflection on the arc of the year? It's been a year of challenges, of difficulties.
My reflection would be that politics has always been about solving problems, always. And perhaps what has been different about our term and terms has been that we've had more challenges and problems to address than perhaps you would usually see. And they've been on a particular scale. But the fact that this is the focus of politics, that is unchanged. Whether or not it's economic headwinds that are coming your way, making sure that you're supporting your people through that, or whether or not you're seeing, spikes in criminal behaviour, politics is about fixing often complex problems. So that is what we're here for. It's fair to say, though, that the context in which we've been doing that has perhaps been a little tougher than usual, but it doesn't change our focus.
Have you found that there's been a personal cost to you during this period, particularly with a lot of the kind of more rabid anti-vax sentiment out there?
I think it's fair to say that the environment in which we're doing politics at the moment is different. I don't think New Zealand is alone in that experience, and so therefore, I don't feel like it's right to try and personalise it to myself or therefore be too woe is me, because this does feel to me to be a bit of a global experience. When I reflect upon that, it's often, for me, it's about how do we make sure that where we have that anxiety, that sense of antagonism, what can we do to ease that for people? So I'm always looking to the solution, if that is that sentiment out there, what can we do to improve that? And so I have thought about that a lot this year.
So, this might be a good time to ask. What have been your lowlights this year? What's been the
hands down that protest at the beginning of the year. I think actually every politician, regardless of whether or not you were in government, found that very difficult.
Was there any particular part of that? Because obviously it lasted for 3 weeks. It was obviously it's seat of government, but also a lot of people's workplace. They come to do the hard mahi every day.
Yes, yeah. I think that was a big part of it. Feeling like actually there's that constant balance. We want to be, and we are, a democracy where we very openly contest ideas. We want to foster that environment. Parliament has a place where you frequently, and you would see that people use that space to, share their various views very openly. We celebrate that, but it tipped from being that space to being a place where people didn't feel safe. And so that was very difficult to see people who come into work every day just to do a job being exposed to that. The other thing that I found difficult is I think one of the toughest things in politics is when you feel that something's been misrepresented. That can be a very frustrating thing. It's part of life, but it can be very frustrating. And I remember distinctly feeling like as I watched it, how difficult it was knowing that everything that we'd done through COVID, and it wasn't perfect, wasn't the perfect response, that where you felt you were making decisions to try and look after people felt like it was the exact opposite. And that was very hard to reconcile. And I think that's one of the things that we found quite tough about it.
Do you think there'll be a hangover from that leading into election year?
Look, I think actually where that real vehemency sits around views on vaccines and things, that's not a widespread sentiment. We know those who feel it deeply, but I don't think it's representative of the majority. I think what we're dealing with now is the economic consequence of COVID. And what's interesting is that we, in all of the forecasting, the view seemed to be it would be much more immediate than it was. There was a view that even at the same time as we were dealing with the pandemic, we would deal with the economic consequences, that we would see that high level of unemployment, that we would see that real stagnation. That didn't happen, and instead what we've seen is a delayed economic impact. So I think what we'll be dealing with in 2023 is how do we deal with the longer-term economic impact of COVID.
With benefit of hindsight, which is always 2020, obviously,
Yes.
but with benefit of hindsight, do you think there were some things that you could or should have done earlier, particularly in regards with regard to inflation?
And I've reflected on this, particularly when I've been overseas and listening to some of my counterparts and reflecting on their circumstances versus ours. It's very, you would have to have anticipated so much more in advance. And I think you even look at the period where if you were to see, and these of course are decisions for the Reserve Bank, but even in the use of monetary policy, to be any earlier than they would have had to have been making some of the changes that people are now having reflected on called for when we were still in the middle of almost semi-lockdowns. And I think people would have found that flip very difficult to understand why that would have been happening at that time. So there will always be things with hindsight you would say, well, actually, if that had happened then, that might have eased the path. But in real time, I think it would have been difficult to see how that will have been seen as sensible at the time.
Rising interest rates while people are stuck at home.
Indeed. And so, look, we do need to reflect on that, though. It's one of the reasons for the Royal Commission. Let's make sure that we aren't just sitting there saying, well, with hindsight, let's actually go back and look properly. I think a lot about, what could we have done to just ease the path as much as possible. One of the things, for instance, with immigration that we're seeing is as much as we've done to try and ease access, actually there's a lot of competition. It's not just about access, it's about attracting people. And people have taken longer to start moving again than I think anyone anticipated. And so we've seen those shortages. I often think, how could we have done more to attract? It's not just about whether you can get a visa, but wanting people to make a permanent move after a really unsettling period in the world. And that's one of the, I think, the challenges that we have as well.
So your highlight for the year?
My highlight, I did not anticipate the amount of benefit I would see and feel and see as measurable from taking out, when we went out with that reconnection plan, trade missions seemed like a no-brainer, and they were. But I did not anticipate how much satisfaction I would get from seeing those New Zealand businesses grow, benefit, and really just succeed on the world stage. Seeing that in real time, being alongside them as there were product launches, being alongside them as they got access to customers that they hadn't before. Silverfern Farms, massive boon with their carbon neutral beef, or seeing Parkable sign up with Meta. What I enjoyed about that is here we had New Zealanders selling themselves to the world and just being met with such accolade. I enjoyed seeing that. I really have. And when I look at the outcomes from some of that, we've got roughly a 40% increase in our food and beverage exports. 75% roughly of our exports are now covered by free trade agreements. And that wasn't by accident. The EU, the UK FTA, the China FTA upgrade, the CPTPP, the RCEP, the Australian ASEAN FTA, I believe in those economic tools, and we've seen the impact they're having. And I'm really proud of that. Yeah.
And just quickly, obviously, there's been a lot of talk about crime.
Yes.
Recently. How concerned are you? I mean, the long-term trend has been down, but there's been a little blip in youth
there has
that's
been
gone back up. And how concerning is that?
Do you
think you're doing enough?
Yeah, so the benefit that we have is that and actually we've been trying to share this as well, so that this is not just information that we have, is actually what we're seeing, its scale is enough that we can actually dig right into individual numbers here. We know, for instance, we've roughly got about 70 kids that are in that difficult age range of about 10 to 13 that we know are a core part of the issue that we're seeing at the moment.
70 kids committing most of the crimes.
Within that 10 to 13, then we've got another age bracket again, but the police will say to you, we often know the families, we know the kids, we know the siblings. Now, when that's your starting point, that means that actually Firstly, it's not a simple solution, but it also means that we can do something about it. It's at a scale that we can. That's one of the benefits of being a country of our size. One of the challenges has been, though, with a complex problem, it is going to take long-term solutions. Now, I'm confident that actually what we've been implementing, and there's more again today, I'm confident because I've tested it with police and with Oranga Tamariki, I'm confident it's going to make a difference for them on the ground. But they're not easy. They're not solutions that are easy to communicate because actually the problems aren't simple.
Mm-hmm. And
when you've got a 10-year-old offending, there is a lot more going on at home, and we know that. But I think we've got all the tools we need to do something about it. We do. It's just a matter about making sure that we move quickly.
And yourself, what are your plans over Christmas?
I'm going to have a sleep. It is a privilege doing this job, no matter what comes your way, it is. And so that sense of responsibility means that I will give every hour that I can. So I'm looking forward to it being a time where it's expected that I can give a few hours to my family.
What do you do for downtime? What do you do to relax somewhat?
Yeah, I'm pretty standard. I will have a few sleep-ins, courtesy of Clark. I will play with my daughter. I will do crafting with my daughter. She loves the water, so we'll be spending a bit of time at the beach. And I'll cook. That's what I do to relax. I'll cook. So that's what I'm looking forward to, really normal things. I would usually say I'll read a book, but I discovered over the last 3 summers that with a little one, the idea that you sit down and read is ridiculous. So I won't even try and claim that.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, Merry Christmas.
And to you.
Have a good break, and
thank you
so much for joining us.
Thank you.